Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Station Prometheus 9 hung in the void like a jewel someone had forgotten to polish, all gleaming metal and sterile functionality. Somewhere deep in its educational sector, where the galaxy's best and brightest came to prove they had what it took to survive anything the universe could throw at them, sat the Galactic Survival Academy. And oh, what a prestigious place it was, if you were into that sort of thing. Graduation certificates from this particular institution opened doors across 32 star systems. Failure, on the other hand, opened nothing, except maybe a career in botanical documentation or tax accounting. The Academy's crown jewel, the class that made grown Crothian warriors weep and caused Lumineth scholars to dim with anxiety, was Extreme Survival Protocols. Taught by the legendary Dr. Naven Rill, a tentacled Ulleran with more eyes than strictly necessary and a personality that could curdle milk across 3 dimensions, this course had a failure rate that would make a statistics professor need therapy. Today was final exam day. The classroom, if you could call it that, looked more like a military command center had a baby with a meditation chamber and then abandoned it in space. Curved walls displayed shifting star maps and survival scenarios. Pod-like seats arranged in a circle faced the center, where a holographic projection stage waited to terrify students with whatever fresh nightmare Dr. Naven Rill had cooked up this semester. Thane arrived first, because, of course, he did. The 4-armed Crothian stood at attention near his assigned pod, all muscle and tactical readiness, probably doing mental push-ups while he waited. His people had conquered 8 solar systems through sheer military prowess and strategic brilliance. This test? This was his moment. His 3rd and 4th arms flexed unconsciously, betraying the only sign of nerves he'd allow himself. Solara manifested next, literally, because Lumineth didn't so much walk as reconstitute themselves in different locations. She existed as a vaguely humanoid form of living crystal, currently shifting through anxious shades of amber and pale green. Light bent around her in ways that hurt to look at directly, and her communication came through color shifts that other species needed translation devices to understand. Right now, her colors screamed, terrified but trying to hide it. Gormath scuttled in on 6 chitinous legs, his compound eyes taking in every detail of the room in that unnerving way that made other species wonder if Chitauri ever stopped analyzing everything. His mandibles clicked in a rhythm that the translation matrix interpreted as confident disdain. He'd already passed 3 other survival courses with perfect scores. This one, he'd announced to anyone who'd listen, would be no different. 3 students, 3 different species, 3 entirely different approaches to survival. All of them ready, prepared, and appropriately terrified. Then there was Dustin. The human stumbled through the door 18 minutes late, looking like death warmed over and then forgotten in a microwave. His hair pointed in directions that suggested sleep had been recent, but not particularly restful. He clutched a container of something that vaguely resembled coffee, if you squinted and had never actually seen coffee before. The smell suggested it was approximately 40% caffeine and 60% regret. "You're late," Dr. Naven Rill announced, their voice carrying that special tone of disappointment that could make students question their entire life choices. Multiple tentacles gestured at the chronometer display hovering above the center stage. "This is the final examination, Dustin. The final examination. Do you understand the significance?" Yeah, sorry," Dustin interrupted, shuffling toward his pod with all the urgency of a sloth on vacation. "Couldn't find my other shoe. Then I found it, but it was in the recycler. Long story. Is there assigned seating, or? Solara's colors flashed through shocked purple. Thane's primary arms crossed, while his secondary arms clenched into fists. Gormath's mandibles stopped clicking entirely, which his species only did when they encountered something so incomprehensible their brains needed a full reboot. Dr. Navanril's leftmost eye twitched. In Ularan body language, this was the equivalent of a full-body seizure of frustration. Pod 4, now. And if you don't take this seriously, super serious, very serious. Dustin dropped into his pod, nearly spilling his toxic beverage in the process. This is my serious face. His face looked like it was contemplating a nap. The doctor's tentacles knotted themselves in what was definitely not a calming breathing exercise. Class, attention. Today you face the culmination of 6 months of intensive survival training. The simulation you're about to enter has broken military officers with 20 cycles of field experience. It has reduced decorated war heroes to quivering masses of PTSD. It has... Dustin raised his hand. What? Is there a lunch break in the simulation? Because I didn't eat breakfast. And no, there is no lunch break. You are being dropped into a hyper-realistic recreation of Carnage 6, a death world so hostile that its own ecosystem is actively trying to murder itself. You will face acid rain, carnivorous flora, predatory fauna, seismic instability, and atmospheric toxicity. The simulation monitors everything: stress hormones, decision-making speed, threat assessment accuracy, resource management, survival instinct response time. Your bodies will remain here in the pods, but your minds will experience every sensation as if you were actually there. The holographic display burst to life, showing a nightmarish jungle landscape where the trees had teeth and the rain could dissolve bone. Thane leaned forward, analyzing. Solara's colors went deep crimson with fear. Gormath's clicking accelerated to a staccato rhythm of calculation. Dustin yawned. Dr. Navanril's central eye, the big one that usually stayed half-closed, snapped fully open. Am I boring you, Dustin? What? No. Just long night. This looks great, though. Very murdery. Good job on the ambiance. The test lasts a minimum of 48 hours. Wait, 48? Like 2 full days? Yes, 48 hours. You will not be allowed to pause. You will not be allowed to exit early unless you suffer complete psychological breakdown or your pod registers your simulated death. The passing score is 82%. Last semester, only 31% of students passed. Do you understand the gravity? So, no sleep? Dustin interrupted again, looking genuinely concerned for the first time. You're supposed to be surviving. Sleep will get you killed. Right, but like 2 whole days without sleep? That seems like survival, Dr. Navanril snapped, their tentacles now doing what could only be described as aggressive gesticulation. In a real crisis situation, you don't get to request a pillow and a bedtime story. You survive, or you die. Those are the options. Dustin took a long sip of his horrible beverage, looking thoughtful in a way that suggested the thoughts were moving very, very slowly. Okay, but counterpoint. Sleep deprivation kills more people than... Pod! Now! Everyone! Into your pods! We're starting immediately before I lose what remains of my sanity to this human's complete disregard for... Just get in the pods. The students complied, even Dustin, who managed to slosh his drink onto his shirt in the process. The pods hummed to life, advanced neural interface systems initializing. Biomonitors attached themselves with soft clicks. The curved lids began to close, sealing each student into their own personal nightmare. In the observation room above, a bank of monitors flickered to life. Each screen showed a student's vital signs, neural activity, and a first-person view of their simulation experience. Dr. Navanril settled into the monitoring chair, tentacles wrapped around various control interfaces, ready to watch their students either triumph or shatter. Additional instructors filtered in. This was always a spectator event. Survival exam day was like the Academy's version of a sports championship, except the only team playing was Psychological Trauma United. "Think any of them will pass?" asked Professor Wendix, a gaseous nephery who existed as a contained cloud of sentient particles. "Thane will," Dr. Navanril replied, eyes fixed on the monitors. "He's been preparing since birth. Solara might, if she can overcome her species' natural aversion to physical violence. Gormath has the knowledge, but tends to overthink. As for the human—" They trailed off, staring at Dustin's monitor. "What about the human?" Wendix drifted closer. "I'm fairly certain he's going to die in the first hour, and spend the rest of the test respawning until he rage quits." On screen, the simulation began. The students materialized in a dense, humid jungle that smelled of decay and digestive enzymes. The sky overhead was a sickly yellow-green, clouds roiling with acid rain waiting to fall. Something roared in the distance, something large, something hungry, something that definitely hadn't read the memo about student safety protocols. Thane hit the ground running, all 4 arms immediately useful. 2 arms grabbed fallen branches for improvised weapons. The 3rd arm tested soil composition. The 4th arm was already building a preliminary shelter framework. His vitals showed elevated heart rate and adrenaline. Perfect stress response for a survival situation. Solara's crystalline form refracted the jungle light in panicked patterns. She pulsed with deep red alarm colors, immediately scanning the environment for threats. Her equivalent of a heartbeat, rhythmic energy fluctuations, showed she was scared but functioning. She began moving toward higher ground, a solid tactical choice. Gormath's compound eyes processed the environment at speed that made the monitors flicker. Threat cataloging, active. Resource identification, running. Escape route calculation, in progress. His 6 legs carried him toward a dense thicket, where he immediately began testing vegetation for toxicity. Textbook survival response. The observation room hummed with quiet approval. These students knew what they were doing. Then someone looked at Dustin's monitor. Dr. Navanril? What? The human? Dr. Navanril's tentacles snapped toward Dustin's screen. The human had landed in a small clearing near a rocky outcropping. He'd stood up, looked around with the enthusiasm of someone checking their mail, brushed some dirt off his pants, and was now walking toward a cave entrance. "Good, good," Navanril muttered. "Shelter-seeking is appropriate first response." Dustin reached the cave, stuck his head in, called out, "Hello?" like he was visiting a friend's apartment. Waited for a response. Then, apparently satisfied that nothing immediately wanted to eat him, he walked inside. The biomonitors showed his stress levels were dropping. "That's odd," Wenedix observed. "Shouldn't he be more alert? The simulation should be triggering all his survival responses by—" On screen, Dustin found a relatively dry spot in the cave. Looked at it, looked at his jacket, took off his jacket, wadded it up into a pillow, lay down. "What is he doing?" Navanril's voice had climbed an octave. Dustin's eyes closed. "Is he resting? Is he just checking for comfort before establishing a proper—" Dustin's breathing deepened, slowed. became rhythmic. His heart rate dropped further. His brainwave patterns shifted into alpha waves, then drifted toward delta. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me!" Dr. Navanrill exploded from their chair, tentacles flailing. "He's asleep. He's actually asleep. In the first 15 minutes of the final exam." The observation room fell silent, except for the hum of monitors and the sound of one human student beginning to snore. Somewhere in the simulation, something howled. Dustin rolled over and kept sleeping. This was going to be a long 48 hours. Hour 1 of the simulation, and things were going exactly as terribly as Dr. Navanrill had designed them to go. Thane had already fought off 2 predators, both of them the size of small shuttlecraft, both of them very confused about why this particular prey item had 4 arms and knew exactly where to stab them. He'd constructed a defensible shelter using tactical principles older than most Federation regulations, complete with sight lines, emergency exits, and a perimeter alarm system made from scavenged bones and vine tripwires. His vitals showed sustained elevated stress, perfect, healthy, appropriate stress, the kind that kept soldiers alive. The monitoring room watched approvingly as he tested the structural integrity of his shelter's roof. This was a student who understood that survival wasn't about comfort. It was about making it to tomorrow, so you could be uncomfortable then, too. Solara had manifested on a cliff face, her crystalline form anchored to the rock in a way that would have made a professional climber weep with envy. She pulsed through tactical assessment colors, deep blue for analysis, sharp orange for threat detection, quick green flashes for resource identification. A pack of something toothy had tried to climb up after her. She'd used focused light refraction to blind them, sending them tumbling back down. Not bad for a species whose homeworld had no predators larger than a house pet. Her energy reading showed depletion, though. Maintaining physical form while under stress was burning through her reserves faster than optimal. She'd need to find sustenance soon or risk destabilization. Gormath was thriving in exactly the way you'd expect a species of paranoid, hyper-analytical insectoids to thrive. He'd cataloged 93 species of flora, identified which ones were edible, which ones would kill you, and which ones would kill you but take their time about it. He'd mapped escape routes, calculated predator patrol patterns, and established 3 separate cache locations for resources. His compound eyes missed nothing. Unfortunately, his mandibles also wouldn't shut up. The translation matrix was working overtime, converting his constant stream of consciousness into galactic standard. And the observers were getting tired of hearing about optimal water filtration techniques. "Does he ever stop talking?" Wendix asked, their gaseous form pulsing with irritation. "Not in my experience," Dr. Navanrill replied, eyes still locked on the monitors. "But he passes tests. That's what matters." "And the human?" Everyone's attention shifted to Dustin's monitor. The human was still asleep. Deeply, peacefully, almost offensively asleep. His cave had turned out to be, through sheer impossible luck, one of the most defensible positions in the entire simulation zone. It was elevated enough to avoid the acid rain pooling that would start in hour 3. It had a natural chimney for air circulation. The entrance was narrow enough that large predators couldn't enter easily. And it was positioned in a geological dead zone, where the seismic activity that would hit in hour 5 wouldn't reach. Dr. Navanrill had placed all these features randomly, scattered across the simulation map like deadly puzzle pieces. The odds of landing near all of them? Approximately 3,000 to 1. Dustin had stumbled into the geological equivalent of winning the lottery, then decided to take a nap about it. His stress hormones are still dropping, noted Professor Kilix, a Drosian physician who specialized in stress response biology. This makes no sense. The simulation should be triggering every survival instinct his species evolved. Humans are from a Class 9 death world. Their entire evolutionary history is about staying alert to threats. Maybe his pod is malfunctioning, Wendix suggested. Navanril checked the diagnostics. No, neural interface is functioning perfectly. He's receiving all sensory input from the simulation. His brain is just choosing to ignore it. On screen, something moved past the cave entrance. Something large. Something that had recently eaten and was still looking for dessert. The creature, a ripjaw stalker, one of Navanril's favorite nightmare creatures, paused at the cave mouth. Its sensor organs, which detected fear pheromones and stress hormones, twitched and probed the air. Nothing. No fear. No stress. No prey signals whatsoever. The stalker, deeply confused by this absence of delicious terror, made a confused chirping sound and wandered off to find something that had the courtesy to be frightened of it. Did that just happen? Killick stared at the monitor. Did a ripjaw stalker just give up because the human wasn't scared? Impossible, Navanril muttered. The simulation adapts to... Dustin rolled over in his sleep, mumbled something unintelligible, and his arm flopped into a different position. This new position happened to knock a small rock toward the cave entrance, which tumbled down and blocked exactly the right amount of the opening to make it even less accessible to large predators. "Oh, come on!" Dr. Navanril's tentacles slapped against the control console. "That's not strategy. That's luck," Wendix offered. "Stupid luck. The stupidest luck I've ever witnessed." Hour 3 arrived with acid rain, right on schedule. Thane had prepared for this. He'd woven a canopy of thick leaves over his shelter, layered and angled for runoff. When the rain started, hissing and steaming where it hit organic matter, his shelter held. Barely. Some drops got through, forcing him to dodge and reposition constantly. His stress levels spiked appropriately. He was surviving, but he was working for it. Solara had to destabilize partially and flow into a rock crevice, compressing her form to avoid the acid. It was uncomfortable, energy-intensive, and her color patterns showed deep distress. But she survived. She adapted. She pushed through. Gormath had constructed an elaborate leaf umbrella system that he continuously repositioned as wind patterns shifted. His legs never stopped moving. His eyes never stopped calculating angles. He was exhausting himself, but staying alive. And Dustin? Dustin's cave had that natural chimney, the one that pulled air up and out, creating negative pressure. The negative pressure that meant the acid rain, even when wind blew it toward the cave entrance, got pulled up and away before it could drift inside. He slept through the entire acid rain event without so much as a drop touching him. His REM cycles were textbook perfect. "I'm going to reprogram this entire simulation," Dr. Navanril announced to the observation room. "Clearly there's a catastrophic flaw in the geographic generation algorithm because there is no way—" "Doctor," Kilix interrupted, pointing at another monitor. "Thane's showing elevated cortisol. He's been in fight-or-flight mode for 3 hours straight. At this rate, decision-making quality will start degrading around hour 6. Navanril forced their attention back to the other students. Right. The ones actually taking the test seriously. Thane was indeed starting to show signs of stress accumulation. His tactical decisions were still sound, but his reaction times had slowed by microseconds. Not much, not enough to fail, but enough to be noticeable. Solara had found a cave system of her own and was currently defending it against some kind of burrowing predator. Her light pulses were becoming erratic, a sign of energy depletion. She needed to rest, but the simulation wasn't giving her a chance. Gormoth had made a critical error. In his exhaustive cataloging of edible plants, he'd misidentified one specimen. Not poisonous enough to kill him, but poisonous enough to make him wish it had. His internal biology was currently fighting a chemical war, while he simultaneously tried to avoid becoming something else's lunch. The other students were suffering exactly as intended. Beautiful, terrible, educational. Hour 6. Dustin woke up. Not because of danger, not because of threats. He just woke up naturally, the way people do when they've had enough sleep. He sat up, stretched, made a face that suggested his neck was stiff, and looked around the cave like he was trying to remember where he'd parked. Finally, Dr. Navanrill leaned forward. Now we'll see him panic. Now the real test begins. Dustin stood up, walked to the cave entrance, stuck his head out, assessed the situation with all the concern of someone checking if it was raining before going to get groceries. The acid rain had stopped. The jungle steamed with residual chemical moisture. Something roared in the distance. Dustin nodded to himself, like the roar confirmed a wee suspicion about local wildlife, and walked outside. "Where is he going?" Wendix asked. "There's no strategic advantage to leaving shelter right now." "Maybe he's going to scout for resources," Killick suggested hopefully. Dustin walked down a slope toward the sound of running water. Not cautiously, not tactically. Just walking, like he was out for a morning stroll in a park that happened to have carnivorous plants and murder lizards. A pack of smaller predators, razor wings, nasty little flying things with serrated feathers, circled overhead. Their hunting pattern involved mobbing prey from multiple angles, creating confusion and panic. They dove at Dustin. He was looking the other way, examining an interesting rock formation. The razor wings, committed to their attack vector, missed him entirely because he'd stopped walking at exactly the wrong moment to look at geology. They swooped back around for another pass. Dustin bent down to tie his shoe. They missed again. "This is absurd," Dr. Navanrill whispered. "This is absolutely absurd." Dustin reached the stream, which ran clear and cold from an underground spring, one of the few safe water sources in the simulation. He splashed water on his face, looked more alert, and then noticed a cluster of fruit growing on a nearby bush. "Don't eat those," Navanrill muttered at the screen. "Those are sanguine berries. They're mildly toxic to most species, and definitely toxic to humans." Dustin picked one, examined it, sniffed it. Don't you dare!" He put it back. Oh, thank the void. He has some survival instinct. Dustin reached for a different fruit, 2 bushes over, picked a handful of them, popped one in his mouth. "What is that?" Navanrill frantically checked the simulation database. "What did he just eat?" Killix pulled up the botanical file. "Caloric pods, nutrient-dense, perfectly safe for human consumption, and packed with sustained energy. They're also the single best food source in the simulation for his species." How did he didn't analyze them. He didn't test them. They look like blueberries, Wenedix observed. "Those are an earth fruit, yes? Perhaps he just assumed?" You can't assume in a survival situation. Dr. Navanrill's tentacles were doing their stressed-out dance again. "That's how you die! That's how you—" Dustin ate another pod, made a satisfied sound, and started walking back toward his cave, pockets full of nutrition. A ripjaw stalker, possibly the same one from earlier, emerged from the undergrowth ahead of him. This time, there was no avoiding it. Direct confrontation. The moment of truth. Fight or flight. The lizard brain response that kept species alive. Dustin stopped walking. The stalker tensed, ready to pounce on fleeing prey. Dustin didn't flee. The stalker's predatory instincts, honed over millions of years of evolution, sent a clear signal. Prey runs. That's what prey does. If it doesn't run, it's not prey. It's something else. Something potentially dangerous. Dustin, utterly unaware he was in a staring contest with certain death, yawned. The stalker's threat assessment systems went haywire. No fear, no movement, just a yawn? This was wrong. This was all wrong. This violated the fundamental predator-prey contract. The creature backed up a step. Dustin, finished yawning, walked around it, giving it about as much attention as you'd give a mailbox. The stalker watched him go, its simple neural network trying desperately to process what had just happened, and failing utterly. In the observation room, silence reigned. "I need to run a full diagnostic," Dr. Navanrill finally said, voice strained. "There's clearly a malfunction in the threat generation algorithms. This can't be." "All diagnostics show normal function," Helix reported, checking the systems. "The simulation is working exactly as designed. It's the human who's malfunctioning." "Humans don't malfunction like this. They're paranoid apex predators. Their entire evolutionary history." "Should we wake him early?" Wendix asked. "This doesn't seem like a fair assessment of his abilities." "No," Navanrill's tentacles coiled with determination. "No, we run the full 48 hours. Maybe he's just lucky so far. Maybe the simulation will adapt. Maybe—" On Dustin's monitor, the human reached his cave, settled back down, and within minutes was asleep again. His vital signs showed perfect calm. His REM cycles resumed. Somewhere in the simulation, something screamed. Dustin's subconscious apparently decided this was white noise and incorporated it into a dream about food court pizza. Dr. Navanrill stared at the monitor with all 6 eyes, a growing sense of existential dread settling into their consciousness. They'd designed hundreds of survival simulations. They'd tested thousands of students. They'd seen brave students break and cowardly students find courage they didn't know they had. They had never, in all their cycles of teaching, seen someone just opt out. And somehow, impossibly, infuriatingly, it was working. Hour 8 approached, and with it, the simulation's environmental escalation protocols. Time to see if the human's luck could survive what Navanrill had planned next. Spoiler alert, it absolutely shouldn't have been able to. But this was Dustin. And the universe, apparently, had a sick sense of humor. Hour 20. If the simulation was a pressure cooker, it had just been cranked up to psychological breakdown and left on high. Most students hit the wall somewhere around this point. That beautiful moment when the sleep deprivation started whispering sweet lies about how maybe that predator isn't so bad. Maybe you should just lie down for a minute. Maybe survival is overrated anyway. Thane was still functional, but barely. His forearms moved through defensive patterns with mechanical precision, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought had started to fuzz around the edges. He'd been awake for 20 hours straight, in constant survival mode, and his tactical genius was beginning to crack. He saw threats that weren't there. He'd rebuilt his shelter twice because he was convinced something had compromised it. Paranoia, exhaustion's favorite cousin, had come to visit. His vitals showed cortisol levels that would make a physician recommend immediate intervention in any other context. Solara was dimming, literally. Her crystalline form pulsed with muddy, exhausted colors, browns and grays that her species only displayed when approaching total energy depletion. She'd found a defensible position in a cave system and hadn't moved in 3 hours, desperately trying to conserve what little power she had left. Every so often, something would probe at her position, and she'd have to expend precious energy fighting it off. She was surviving, but she was paying for every minute of it. Gormath had made his second critical mistake. The first had been eating something mildly poisonous. The second was trying to outsmart the simulation through pure calculation, while his brain was running on fumes and stomach acid. He'd spent the last 6 hours constructing an elaborate trap system that, in his exhausted state, he'd accidentally designed to trap himself. He was currently stuck in his own snare, mandibles clicking in frustrated patterns that translated to words the station's language filters had to bleep out. 3 students, all of them suffering exactly as designed. Beautiful, pedagogical suffering. And then there was Dustin. Dustin woke up for the second time, natural and easy, like he'd just had a pleasant nap at home. He'd been asleep for most of the last 20 hours, with brief intermissions for walking around, eating more of those caloric pods, and generally treating the Death World simulation like a casual camping trip with slightly inconvenient wildlife. His stress hormones, still lower than his resting baseline back at the station. His cognitive function, perfectly sharp because, and here's the thing that was making Dr. Navanril question their entire career, he was actually well rested. "This is cheating," Navanril announced to the observation room, which had gained additional spectators as word spread about the humans' impossible run. "This has to be cheating. There's no possible way." "All monitoring shows his experience is authentic," Kilix reported, checking the neural interface data for the 100th time. "He's experiencing the simulation exactly as designed. He's just choosing to not care about it." Dustin stepped out of his cave, looked at the sky, which roiled with the kind of clouds that promised something worse than acid rain, and made a thoughtful humming sound. Not a concerned sound, just thoughtful, like he was considering paint colors. Then he did something that made every instructor in the observation room lean forward. He looked annoyed. "Finally," Navanril whispered. "Finally, an appropriate emotional response to—" Dustin picked up a rock and threw it at a flying creature that had been circling overhead for the last hour. His aim was terrible. The rock sailed wide by several meters, but the gesture itself, the casual dismissal of a predator as a mere annoyance, sent the creature flying off in confused retreat. Did he just throw a rock at a screech hawk out of irritation? Wendix sounded impressed, despite themselves. "Those things have been known to carry off fully grown Crothians." "He doesn't know that," Kilix observed. "He has no idea what that creature is capable of. He's operating on pure, what would you call it? Audacity?" "Stupidity," Dr. Navanril corrected. "The word is stupidity." But here's where things got interesting, and by interesting, we mean completely, utterly, catastrophically weird. Dustin started walking with purpose. Not tactical purpose, not strategic purpose, just the kind of purpose someone has when they've decided they're done being inside and want to explore a bit. He walked down slopes, around terrain features, through areas that should have been crawling with predators. And everywhere he went, his slow, unconcerned pace, his complete lack of fear responses, his utter failure to behave like prey, it all created a bubble of predator confusion around him. Things that should have attacked didn't. Not because they couldn't, but because every single instinct they had screamed that something was wrong with this particular prey item. Fear pheromones were how predators tracked targets. Stress hormones were the dinner bell. Panic was the appetizer. Dustin offered none of these things. He was a walking, yawning middle finger to millions of years of predator-prey evolution. "It's the human factor," a new voice said from the observation room entrance. Everyone turned. Dr. Karina stood there, arms crossed, wearing an expression somewhere between amusement and exasperation. She was one of the few other humans on the station, specializing in comparative species psychology and, more specifically, explaining to confused aliens why humans did the bizarre things they did. "The what?" Dr. Navanrill asked. "The human factor. You designed this test for species that evolved in rational ecosystems with rational threat responses. Humans didn't evolve in a rational ecosystem." Karina walked to the monitors, studying Dustin's vitals. "We evolved on a Class 9 death world where literally everything was trying to kill us, all the time, forever. So we developed a really weird psychological defense mechanism. Which is? Selective concern. Humans don't panic about everything because if we did, we'd never stop panicking. Our brains got really, really good at deciding what's actually dangerous versus what just looks dangerous. And you know what humans find more dangerous than simulated predators?" She pointed at the sleep deprivation data from the other students. "That. Exhaustion. Sleep deprivation kills more humans than most predators ever did." Navanrill's tentacles went still. "You're telling me his brain decided the test itself wasn't the real threat? His unconscious survival instincts correctly identified that staying awake for 48 hours straight would impair his decision-making, slow his reactions, and potentially kill him. So his brain said nope, and prioritized actual biological needs over simulated danger." Karina grinned. "He's not ignoring the test. His survival instincts are working perfectly. They're just optimized for actual survival, not for theatrical survival." The observation room fell silent as this sank in. "But that means," Dr. Navanrill sputtered, "the entire point of the test is to measure survival instincts," Karina finished. "And his are functioning beautifully, just not the way you expected." On screen, Dustin found a tree, decided it looked climbable, and started climbing, not to escape a threat, not as part of a tactical plan. He just wanted to see what the view was like from up there. From his new vantage point, he spotted something the simulation designers hadn't intended anyone to find: a flaw in the terrain generation, a path through the upcoming environmental catastrophe that would hit in hour 30. He looked at it, nodded to himself like he'd just figured out a crossword puzzle clue, and climbed back down. Dr. Navanrill stared at the monitors with a growing sense that the universe was personally mocking them. "He's going to pass, isn't he?" they asked quietly. Dr. Karina laughed. "Oh, he's going to do better than pass." 1:48. The end. The pods hissed open in sequence, releasing 4 students who had experienced very different versions of hell. Well, 3 students who had experienced hell, and 1 who had experienced what amounted to a slightly inconvenient camping trip. Thane emerged first, his 4 arms shaking with residual adrenaline. His eyes held that 1,000-yard stare you usually only saw in combat veterans. He'd survived. He'd conquered. He'd proven himself. He also looked like he might punch the next person who said the word survival in his presence. Solara materialized out of her pod like light through dirty water. Dim, flickering, barely holding form. She'd made it, but just barely. Her color patterns showed deep exhaustion mixed with profound relief. She'd need at least a week to fully recharge. Gormoth scuttled out on unsteady legs, mandibles clicking weakly. He'd passed. He was certain of it. He'd used every bit of his species' analytical abilities, catalogued every threat, calculated every variable. He'd also aged approximately 10 cycles in 2 days and developed what would probably be a lifelong nervous tic. Then Dustin sat up, stretched, yawned, and said, "Oh, good. Is the cafeteria still open? I'm starving." 3 pairs of eyes, well, 3 regular pairs plus Gormoth's compound eyes, so technically thousands of eyes, stared at him with expressions ranging from disbelief to homicidal rage. "You..." Thane's voice came out as a croak. "You slept. You actually slept." "Yeah, I mean, 48 hours? That's like medically dangerous levels of sleep deprivation. So I figured you were supposed to be fighting for your life." Gormoth's mandibles clicked so fast, the translation matrix struggled to keep up. "I was poisoned. Twice. I was trapped in my own defensive perimeter. I calculated 3,000 different threat scenarios. You slept." "Right. But none of it was real, though, so..." "That's not the point. Students," Dr. Navanril's voice cut through the rising argument. All tentacles were pointed at the central display, where the holographic scoring system was compiling results. "The simulation has automatically graded your performances based on the established metrics. These scores are final and cannot be contested." The room fell silent. This was it. The moment that would define their academy careers. Thane's scores appeared first, scrolling across the display in cool blue light. Stress management, 83% resource efficiency, 89% threat assessment, 91% decision-making quality, 85% overall score, 86% at passing, solid passing, respectable passing. Thane nodded, satisfied despite his exhaustion. Solara's scores materialized in shifting colors. Stress management, 80% resource efficiency, 85% threat assessment, 88% decision-making. Quality, 83% overall score, 84%. She pulsed with relieved amber. Passing. She'd passed. Gormoth's results clicked into existence. Stress management, 66% resource efficiency, 91% threat assessment, 95% decision-making. Quality, 68% overall score, 80% barely passing, but passing. His overthinking had cost him, but his analytical skills had saved him. Then Dustin's scores appeared. The room went silent. Stress management, 98% resource efficiency, 95% threat assessment, 89% decision-making. Quality, 91% overall score, 93% nobody breathed, nobody moved. The number hung there in the air like an accusation against reality itself. 93%, one of the highest scores in academy history, for a student who had slept through most of the test. "No," Dr. Navanril said flatly. "No, absolutely not. There's been an error. Run diagnostics. Run them again. Run them a third time. This can't..." "All systems functioning normally," Kilix reported, checking and rechecking. "The scoring algorithm is working as designed. These results are accurate." "How?" The word exploded from Navanril with enough force to make several tentacles go rigid. "How is this possible?" Dr. Karina stepped forward, still wearing that knowing smile. "Because the test measured survival instincts, not survival theater. And Dustin's instincts were objectively correct." "Explain." "Now." Stress management, 98%, because he wasn't stressed. He correctly identified that the simulation wasn't an actual threat to his life. Resource efficiency, 95%. He barely expended any energy because he was sleeping. Threat assessment, 89%. Every time he did encounter something, he evaluated it accurately, even if he did so accidentally. Decision-making quality, 91%. Every choice he made, from finding that cave to eating those specific berries to climbing that tree, was tactically sound. But he wasn't trying. That's exactly the point, Karina interrupted. In a real survival situation, overthinking kills you, panic kills you, exhaustion definitely kills you. Dustin's subconscious survival instincts knew what the real threats were: sleep deprivation, poor nutrition, stress-induced mistakes. So his brain prioritized those actual dangers over simulated ones. That's not cheating. That's advanced threat assessment. Thane's arms crossed. So you're saying that doing nothing is somehow better than everything I did? No. I'm saying what you did would keep you alive in a real survival situation. What he did would also keep him alive, just with less effort. Different strategies, both valid. This is ridiculous, Gormath clicked. This makes a mockery of... The scores are final, Dr. Navanrill said, voice heavy with resignation. Academy regulations state that simulation results cannot be overturned except in cases of technical malfunction. There was no malfunction. Therefore, they paused, every tentacle drooping with defeat. Therefore, Dustin passes. With distinction. The human in question had been quiet during this entire exchange, mainly because he was trying to remember if he'd left his jacket in the pod. Cool, he said finally. So, graduation party? Because, seriously, I could really go for some actual food. Not trying to complain, but the cafeteria's protein paste situation is... Out! Dr. Navanrill pointed toward the door with 3 tentacles simultaneously. Everyone out. I need to completely redesign this entire curriculum, and I need to do it while questioning every life choice that brought me to this moment. As the students filed out, 3 exhausted, 1 confused, Dr. Karina lingered at the doorway. You know, she said conversationally, humans have been accidentally surviving things for millennia. We're not always the strongest or the fastest. We're just really, really good at being too stubborn or too oblivious to die properly. It's kind of our thing. That's not reassuring, Navanrill muttered. It's not meant to be. It's just the truth. She left, and Dr. Navanrill slumped in their chair, surrounded by monitors showing the complete data from Dustin's run. Every impossible coincidence, every accidental success, every moment where the human had somehow turned sheer lack of concern into a survival strategy. In the hallway outside, Dustin was already asking about next semester's classes, wondering if advanced combat techniques had better snack breaks than this one did. The galaxy, Dr. Navanrill reflected, was in for a very interesting time if this was the caliber of human it was producing. And, somewhere in the maintenance sector, technicians were already being tasked with redesigning the entire Survival Academy curriculum to account for something the designers had never anticipated. A species that survived by simply refusing to acknowledge that survival was supposed to be hard. The human factor, indeed.